Okay, moving on to our third work session, September 10th, 2025, jail market study. And Dave Shook, welcome.
Morning, Council, Chair, County Manager. Did you want to start or did you want me to do that? Okay. Well, thank you for having us here. We're in the middle of quite a extensive project, and so I've over the last 6 months been reaching out to some of my former cohorts down in Oregon who've been some of the most successful in PRing and educating and researching funding opportunities in other ways. And so some of the different things that they talked about, that's what I'm going to present to you today. And one of the first things is educating our community. It's also gathering information for leadership to make decisions on how we fund, how do we create messaging and other things to be successful in those very expensive projects that we're trying to accomplish here. And so as we look at this different survey, so kind of how we got here is we actually have a parks manager who has some success in the state to the south of us doing some market surveys. And as some of the conversations locally and regionally, this research firm has been one that's been used for quite an extensive way. We'll show you some of those examples at the end of the presentation. But as I've reached out to different folks, this really felt like the right way to go. And again, as county employees, we have to stay away from the political aspect. We're just gathering facts and details, right? And so there's laws and RCWs that say that, right? And so the purpose of this market study is to really gather those details. So as you can see what the purpose and the value of this research is going to do for us, it's going to really assess that public sentiment. How are they going to do? I know Councillor Little, you just mentioned hearing from constituents on all the taxes and all the things that we're doing, but it's also important to understand where those priorities fall into our community. Where does public safety, and I know this council and county management and others, public safety is number one, right? And we spend a lot of money with that. So this survey is going to help us to derive that information from some of the public involvement, also kind of craft that. So the second part of this is going to identify those paths of that support. How do we get that public support to identify? I know we had a presentation from PFM and they gave us 3 or 4 different options, and I know the county manager and finance team and you all are making those decisions on how we move, but this should be able to also provide some information for you to help you in that decision. And then again, of course, it's going to inform some of the policies and decision makers on when do we go to the public? How do we go to the public? What processes are we going to use? So again, it's going to provide some additional information that county management's going to use to move us forward in this project. Next slide, please. Of course, if you have questions along the way, please ask me. And so again, insights gained, we're going to look at clarifying the community priorities. We're going to support informed our leadership and moving this forward. We're going to strengthen our outreach and messaging. And then, of course, equip our stakeholders that are going to be helping us to passing along this message. When I often talk to the public, they often don't know anything about the jail. They don't know how old it is, any of the issues that we experience, how that affects law enforcement and how they are unable to fully use that, or how the court systems, probations, and all those entities that utilize our 4 walls and the jail bed space that we currently have. And so this is going to help in modeling some of that communication methods so that we can go out over the next 9 to 10 months before we get to that decision point on whether we're doing ballots or other measures or your different kinds of levies and other things that you all may decide in the future on how do we do this. And so this is going to help us to kind of really frame that messaging for the public. And so next slide, please. And then, of course, I just wanted to tell or show you or illustrate the processes. So again, as we have had some conversations with this DHM research company, they've put together a scope of work and what that would look like and some of the things that we could get from that. And of course, first thing I got to start with is a baseline survey. How does our public see what's going on in our community, right? So they're going to do some surveying with the community. They're going to use some different things, not just landlines and calls, but computers and messaging, and try to identify those folks willing to have conversations about our community, public safety, and so forth. And again, as you can see, the exploration they're going to be looking at, it's kind of the mood, the trust in local government, some of the priorities and perceived issues, awareness of our jail, as we've already spoken about, and then the willingness to help fund those improvements. Again, I think as they gather that information, that'll help us to also target and surgically look at different areas that we're going to have these conversations. And then, of course, they're going to give us that information so that we can come back. But what they're going to find in this first phase is they're going to find those folks that are on the fence, even the ones that are saying, nope, sorry, I don't support. And then in the next phase, as you can see, they're going to actually do some town hall-ish or some focus groups with those swing voters and try to have some conversations and try to dig into what the reluctance is or figure out other messaging opportunities. And this is really going to be the meat and the potatoes on how do we then move forward with our messaging? How do we move forward with the information that they're going to need, our community of over 500,000 are going to need to help support this generational project? You've all heard me talk about this as an ecosystem, and when you have a sick component of that system like the jail is, that can't effectively do all that it needs to do, all the other parts of the system are not effective or as effective as they can be. And so as you can see, some of the explorations, concerns and questions, reasons for the support or opposition, so that again, we can have some discussions about that, surface themes or messaging for future educational opportunities. And then again, gathering those preferences to inform our stakeholders, and then those that are going to help us to get the messaging out. So this part will become a really important part, because we know there's going to be some folks that are yes, 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 but it's those ones in the middle, the ones that have a no stance on no tax, no funds, no levies, no how do we do this, right? It's how do we have that educational conversation. So they're gonna get this information for us. And then, of course, there's a third opportunity. So in between the phase 2 and the phase 3, that's where the education, the public education will be used, using more technology, smart technology to get the messaging out to different people in our community. Oftentimes you see, and whether it's a advertisement on the news, it goes out to everybody in the Portland region, right? Well, we don't really necessarily, not care isn't the right word, but we don't care what the south of the river people think necessarily. We want to focus on our voters, right? We want to focus on the groups that are going to be concerned about this jail and this system, and also how they're going to help support that. So we have some new technology, a new company or another company that's going to help us to do that. And so as we look at this different aspect and this follow-up, that's really to say, from phase 1 to phase 3, has the messaging hit the mark? Is the community messaging or mindset about how we fund, how do we develop this, how do we pay for this generational project? Is it hitting in a positive manner? And this is really that decision point for leadership, county leadership, to decide which direction we go. And we have about a little over a year to make this happen, but this third phase, I think, will become really important in that summertime frame, so that as we decide, how do we move forward, we've already got that in plan on our phasing. And so again, next slide, please. Again, this is kind of just a reiteration of how we're going to use this information. Again, it's going to inform us and the leadership teams on how to move forward with this. It's going to help shape and design how that messaging comes out to the folks, and then how that engagement happens. You all go to meetings, I could go to meetings, everybody and we don't hit all the right people that need to hear this information. And so again, it's how do we engage? And then again, it's equipping our partners that are also out there sharing our messaging with the public on how important this is. And I know everybody can generally understand crime and public safety and all that kind of stuff, but how does this really fit into the equation will be important to share. And then again, it's building that trust, making sure that our community is a part of these conversations, and building the future of what this community needs to be to help support the efforts. And so again, next slide, please. Here are some general costs on what this survey is going to cost in each phase, general costs. And again, we're in phase 1 or 2 of this conversation. And if there's something we want to tweak or change or whatever, we can absolutely do that. But it feels like these 3 phases are really critical for such a huge expense and effort of the county and this community as we move forward. And again, as we look at this, but again, it's part of a conversation. I know Deanne here is helping us to finish and finalize that contract with the vendor and the contracted person or the company. So, and next slide, please. And then here's just some other regional and local examples of this company and what they've done. And again, there's some others on there. I had a list of about 12 or 14 of them. I just picked and choose some that were local and similar to what we're doing here and their efforts and what they've done for different communities, including our own already. So, and last slide. And this is really our goal and agenda. It's our mission statement as a jail for the county. And it really is to promote and maintain public safety through effective correctional and reentry practices. I put this on the end of most presentations because this is what drives us and what we do. Whether it's MOUD conversations we're having, whether it's this process conversation we're having, it's how do we make this more effective for not just the folks that are inside, but our community and the external groups that use our jail facilities. So any questions or thoughts about this process or what we're trying to accomplish here?
On the examples, is there like a summary of what they were proposing and how their messaging may have gone, or how successful they might have been? Is there little vignettes?
I don't have that. I don't have that for this moment, but I can definitely grab that for you.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
of course.
And then I would just say generally, and Dave, I want to thank you for all your effort in moving this project forward, and also thank Councilor Belcott, because she and I were both involved with the jail remodel committee. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now, and so we've already made a significant investment to get us to this point. And you know, I feel like we've tailored things very well to meet the needs, but then to also be cost effective. But even being as cost effective as we can, it's still a significant amount of money for. And I think you're correct in describing it as a multi-generational investment. So I think this is a critical piece of it to help us be successful. And along the way, as the committee had been meeting, because, you know, this was a process that the community went through previously and didn't get it over the finish line. And so needs have only increased. So I'm very supportive of this. And I think there's a particular role that the council can play as we're, you know, out and about in the community and talking about this. So I look forward to being better informed on how to talk about this. So just
Absolutely.
thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure. So yeah, in lines with that, are there other things we can do with this market study? What I'm curious about is lessons learned from local initiatives that have failed or passed in our community. So I'm thinking particularly Vancouver's public safety initiative, the failed one and the one that will be on the ballot. I'm thinking fire, I'm thinking school initiatives, and I'm wondering if they can look at, or someone can look at, what was the outreach that was done for each one and how effective was it in turning out different voter? Is there a correlation between certain best practices and voter turnout and votes? I'm wondering if we can look at that.
Right.
That's one
So
question.
when I picked and choose these 5 or 6 projects that I put up on the screen, there was some detail to that, and our follow-up conversations with DHM will definitely have that kind of conversation attached, and we can definitely bring that back with some lessons learned and other things and follow-up conversations along the way. I find this will be probably speaking points for all of us as we're out and about, community, dinners, family, whatever that looks like, where everybody's involved in this. So yes, Counselor, I think you'll be able to get a lot of that information, and then we should be able to use that in our efforts to move our efforts forward in this project specifically. So,
and with regards to the city and Prop 4, they did do a lot of reflection and analysis of why it failed. I know Lon had shared some of that with me. I would prefer to go back to Lon to make sure I'm not going to misrepresent, because it's been a couple months since I talked to him about that. But they did have some good feedback that helped drive their new proposition that's going out as well. So I will follow up with council on that as well.
Very, very good points. And I think for who's been successful locally and who has failed locally, but lessons to learn on both sides. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I just know that that would probably take a lot of research and possibly money to find the answers to that, besides just looking at what other jurisdictions have done through their own reflection. And then I just want to make sure that there's a next stage to this. There's going to be a whole outreach plan. How do we reach? One question here I do have with market study, when we're interviewing folks, how do we try to increase the participation of actual voters? How do they narrow down the list to make sure that we're talking to the target audience?
In the original scope documents, a lot of that is gained through the initial conversations in phase one of trying to figure out, these are PhDs and experts, masters, and other folks that this is their whole profession, and figuring out that messaging and other information. My understanding is phase one is how phase two is created and how phase three then ends, right? And so the whole information gathering from the in-person thing is going to create a lot of the messaging. And so, counselor, why is this not a, well, let's have that initial conversation. So that's why, again, it costs money to do that. But I also think that they've probably already gathered some of the, hey, how could the agency organizations could have done better? Those are conversations I'll definitely bring back to council once we start getting some of the messaging and the other information from this group. And in fact, probably bring them with me to have a follow-up conversation to what have we found, where are we at in another work session. So,
Okay, thank you for all this work.
of course.
Counselor Belcott, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Dave, I think we talked about it too as part of this, or maybe Amber brought this up. There's also a timing element of it as well, like what the most successful time of the year it would be to go on the ballot. Isn't that part of it as well?
Yes, I think in one of the bullet points I talked about timing and decision making, and if I didn't include that, there is a part of the scope of work about timing. And again, there may be a prioritization and timing that says we need to move this one way or the other because of that specific timing, but that will be information will be gleaned from the different study parts of it, Counselor.
All right, thank you. Thank you for all your work on this. It's been actually one of my favorite committees that I've been on. It's been really interesting and is right in line with my professional background. So thank you for all of this.
Well, it definitely takes a big team. This is such a huge project, and including yourselves to be a part of that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Counselor Young.
Yes, I just wanted to say that it's important. I think this is critical work. I've been waiting for this for a long time. And I think it's important to point out that the purpose of this is not to convince the voter to vote yes or no. The purpose is so that we can understand and potentially tailor what we do and how we do it to where the voter would be more supportive of it, and that they would be supportive because they realize that it's a benefit to their community. So that the other thing too is that I would point out that the only other way for us to get this information would be to put it on the ballot and potentially fail, which would cost taxpayers significantly more than what we would pay for this information. And it wouldn't come with any background information on why it failed, or what changes need to be made or anything like that. So this is a wise use of funds. It can really help us tailor this to where we can garner, support from the community. And I did want to mention too, though, that I would hope that the phases, in the contract, if we get through phase one and there is no appetite, that we can cancel the future phases. I hope that's not the scenario, but I think it would be important to do that. I mean, if there's just a resounding no, from the initial phase, then I don't know that there would be purpose on continuing further
I
or
think the
delaying that.
purpose would be to serve the community and improve much needed facility.
I guess, Counselor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think phase 1 and 2 kind of go together, right? Phase 1 is to figure out what the appetite is, and then phase 2 is to figure out, is there opportunities in there to grow or educate, right? Because oftentimes it's education, I think, is missing. And again, it costs money. I understand that part of it, but I think the educational part in that phase 2 is where we're really going to glean a lot of the great information on how do we even, and again, as we do whatever process we decide to go, it's going to be a positive. I have no doubt, fingers crossed, all that stuff. But if it isn't, then we can learn from that next step, right? Because that is a part of it. So I would say at least the first 2 phases are critical. And again, that third one even is an investment. And
To me, the way I see it, you would either stop after phase 1 or you would go all the way through.
Okay.
Because to me, you spend the time with focus groups trying to figure out how to make it better. Then you still need to understand the appetite of whether it would be successful potentially or not. So, I mean, if it's not a big deal, I would just put in there that it could be for whatever reason that we chose not to. I have no intent whatsoever. I think this is critically important for our community and to support it 100%. But
Thank you.
if something were to happen, or we have a severe economic downturn, things like that, it would be good to be able to have the option to discontinue if needed.
I think ultimately it's up to the council to put something on the ballot or not. So I think going through the entire process is important to inform that ultimate decision that we make. So
Okay.
thanks
Good
for
to know.
those comments. Anything else from anyone?
no, ma'am.
Okay, and what's so the general timeline would be?
So
just
Deanna
summarize
and I
that.
are going to work on finishing up the contract. It'll go through legal review, and I think because of the cost, I think it only will go up to the county manager. But and the way that they've described it, as soon as we can do it, it's like a month and a half, 30 to 40-day process. They're ready to roll. And then from there, it's a couple weeks in between, and then they're moving on to phase 2. So fingers crossed, January, they should have some general sense for us in the next, then however months to move forward. So we're ready to move this forward very quickly. If thumbs up, everything's good to go.
I'm wondering about those months once we get the contract, what their time frame is.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think it's 2 to 4 weeks to do the phone calling, a couple weeks afterwards to do the analysis, and then they've already gathered that information on who they're calling back. And then that next part will start really quickly after the fact. So it's a really expeditious process. So I'm thinking January, we should have phase 2 information that's fairly quick, I think, in this scheme of stuff.
And when would the council need to make a decision ultimately on what might go on the ballot?
Yeah, what we had shared last time we had the update on this is by second quarter of 2026 is when council will be making the decision on what gets put on the ballot and when.
Okay, and then I think that if it's appropriate, share this information with the Law and Justice Council. They will be interested in this and may be able to provide some feedback as
Absolutely.
well. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Dave, and
Oh,
thank
thank
you,
you.
Deanne, for moving this through the process.
Thank you. Have a great
Okay.
day.
You too. All right, so 3 very good work sessions. We've concluded, and this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you at 1 o'clock.